Hello and welcome to How to Start Up, a podcast for anyone starting a company. This is a collection of conversations with people who have all successfully started, run and even sold their own companies, sharing not only professional but personal experiences on what we should be doing now, next or never. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of PR consultancy for startups Fallowfield & Mason. I'm delighted to be joined today by Whitney Bromberg Hawkings, co-founder and CEO of FLOWERBX and one of the UK's most innovative entrepreneurs. Following a career of almost 20 years working for designer Tom Ford, Whitney then identified a market gap within the luxury sector that she set out to fill. She established FLOWERBX in London in 2015, and today Whitney's company is the leading luxury flower service, having had clients such as Dior, Louis Vuitton, and is currently expanding across the US. Having just announced an 8 million Series A round of investment, Whitney shares advice on how to scale at pace and also why you should wait to find the right people to support your business. Hi Whitney, thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you on How to Start Up. It would be wonderful if you could start with a brief introduction as to who you are and a little bit about the business that you've started.
Hi, my name's Whitney. I'm so happy to be here. I'm the CEO and founder of FLOWERBX, an online flower delivery company that's now available across the UK, Europe, and the US.
Congratulations, Whitney. That is huge. Because when did you start FLOWERBX?
I started it 5 years ago.
What was your thinking behind starting FLOWERBX as a floristry brand?
Yeah, so I started FLOWERBX after working for the designer Tom Ford for almost 2 decades. And it was sort of two-pronged, the approach. But really, as a working mom, I was buying everything in my life online. I was buying my clothes online. I was buying my beauty online. I was buying my farm fresh organic groceries online. But if I wanted to buy flowers, I could either go to an overpriced florist and get flowers that were usually, 4 or 5 days old, or I could go to the Covent Garden flower market before work. But there I was in stilettos and a pencil skirt, because obviously that was my uniform. And just thought, there's no solution for me to buy fresh flowers at, with great value in London or, in New York, the same thing. When I was a student in New York, I'd go to the flower market, but it wasn't something that was convenient. Then also, when I was sending flowers, I was pretty consistently disappointed with what I ended up sending. Even if I spent a lot of money, it was never the right color, the color I had asked for. It was always sort of these weird mixed bouquets that were usually disappointing. So I thought, how come something like sending flowers that's meant to be like such a joyous and elegant thing to do, it was so consistently disappointing? So I set out to create a flower brand. Like most things in the world have been branded, and you get a consistent offering, you get a consistent ribbon, consistent quality, consistent wrapping paper. So you know exactly what you're getting. So I wanted to create a brand of flowers. Those were sort of the two reasons why I started FLOWERBX.
So it was really a case of you had personally experienced this problem and you saw the solution and how to fix it. Why was it you particularly wanted to start it in the UK?
Well, I live in London, so it was very obvious for me to start where I knew. But in my mind, it was never going to be. A lot of people are like, "Oh, did you always want to be a florist?" And I was like, "No, I never wanted to be a florist." And now more than ever, I especially don't want to be a florist. But I always saw it as a global solution, not just a sort of localized solution.
There's a lot of other founders I've spoken to who, when they introduce themselves, they say, "I'm a founder," or "I'm an entrepreneur," or "I've started a company," before they say, "I'm a CRM expert," or "I am an architect," which is the core of their business. So do you see yourself as a business expert before you see yourself as a florist?
Florist would be so low on the list of what I am. And florist would be at the bottom of the list.
I find that really interesting because the bit of the job that I knew that I could do, i.e. PR and communications, now forms a much smaller percentage of my day-to-day than I really imagined it would, because you are wearing so many different hats. You're doing website builds, payroll. How do you manage all of those different tasks? Do you seek advice from a mentor, or have you just learnt?
I love that you say at the beginning, because I keep thinking, like, when does this stop? I love someone emailed me last week and they're like, "Do you mind having your assistant get in touch with me?" I'm like, when do I get an assistant? Because that would be nice. I don't think it ever stops because, sure, I don't know. I'm 5 years in and I'm definitely wearing multiple hats. But I've been surrounded by really great women. I've got an amazing team. I also have a really great group of female investors who, are there for advice. They're there for, they're huge brand ambassadors. They're evangelical about FLOWERBX and helping to spread the word. So I'm very lucky to be surrounded by a great group of women.
In terms of when you first started the company, did you resign your role with Tom Ford and then the next day start FLOWERBX, or were you sort of mulling it over for a while? Was there a key moment in that timeline where you switched your businesses?
No, well, actually, I had started FLOWERBX as a side hustle just to see if I could really do it. And I thought in my mind, I had this fantasy of I was going to keep my day job, keep my fancy office and my nice salary, and then have this side hustle where I could sort of employ people to come and, make FLOWERBX a reality. But it became very clear very fast that it wasn't going to go anywhere unless I left my career. I also was pregnant with my third child, so I wasn't also going to leave 3 months, 4 months pregnant. So I had my third child, and then that I left, and then I was full-time FLOWERBX.
Incredible. And how do you manage that juggle between your personal self and your professional self?
Again, I'm not sure I manage it well. Some days I manage it great and some days less well, but I've got an awesome team at FLOWERBX, and I really have an awesome team at home. I have a terrific husband who definitely picks up slack when I can't. And I have, our nanny's been our nanny for 13 years. So she's, since my first was born. So she's definitely, the sort of third parent. And, but the juggle's real, obviously.
You've scaled the business very quickly in terms of coming from no idea to starting the business to it being a success and then an expansion. You've recently gone through a big raise. You have a chairperson you have a board of directors. How have you tackled all of that? Was it people saying you should bring in these people right now, or did you just know that that's what you needed to support your business? And correct me if I've got any of that wrong, by the way.
No, it's all true. And you just know, I think I know what I'm good at. And I think it's also really important to know what I'm not good at, and know, I feel such a responsibility to my shareholders to deliver on this dream that we're all behind. So it's so important for me to get the people in that can help me do that. So I think knowing your strengths and also knowing your weaknesses is key. And
from your previous experience, obviously you've worked for very prestigious brands before you started FLOWERBX. Is there anything that you've brought across from that luxury sector experience into FLOWERBX's offering?
Oh, every single thing. I think, and that had never been applied to flowers. I think people underestimate how hard people in fashion work and people in luxury work. It seems so fancy and fabulous, but man, that hustle in fashion and, those weeks before the show and the long nights and the weekends and the, endless work. So I definitely brought that sort of work ethic and hustle to FLOWERBX, but also arguably there's no one better at creating a brand than Tom Ford. So I learned from him how to stay true to a vision, how to be so precise in every single thing that represents the brand externally, how to say no to things, always say no to things that aren't right for the brand. So I learned so many things and brought so many of those details to FLOWERBX. And
that experience you had, I think it builds up your gut feeling, doesn't it? So when you're completely time poor in starting a company, trusting your gut feeling can be so important. And is there anything that you would go back and not do again? Is there any sort of mistakes in the road that you would like to have undone, or is it all just good learning?
Oh, there are a million things I would like to undo. But then I think all of it sort of somehow in a circuitous way gets you to where you are. But I've made a billion mistakes, and I'm sure I'll make a billion more. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole road of entrepreneurship is full of multiple little failures. And you're like, because no one's ever done it before. So how are you meant to know how to do it? That's the whole point.
That's a really good point, isn't it? When you're doing something new that's never been done before, of course, there's no Bible to read, or someone said to me, it's like, well, of course you've read all the books, haven't you? And I was like, what books? I don't know if there are any books on what I'm doing right now. And someone else said, be okay with the roller coaster, which I know you and I've chatted before about this, that it really is a roller coaster. And do you have any advice for founders on how to manage that almost anxiety around that?
It's funny, I was out to dinner with 3 founders last night, 3 female founders who were all 3 in sort of high growth, super exciting companies. And we're like, there's no way to manage it. I think having a support group of people who are like, you're going to get through this. The same thing happened to me. Here's how, and here's how you can navigate it. And just having a sort of network of great founders around you that have maybe encountered some of the problems before is one way. I also think fail fast. Just don't hold on to things that aren't working. Move on. Because I think, especially as women, we try to make things right, or if it's not working, just move on. If it's not working with a person, it's probably time to move on, not to spend 3 months or 6 months trying to make that person right or make your job right for that person. It's just failing fast really can save a lot of time and resource.
And you don't have the capacity to suffer fools either. I think before you'd maybe have the luxury of a massive team, then things could get swept under the carpet a little bit. You are front center at the coalface. You have to make those decisions and make them fast. Something in terms of the luxury flower market I wanted to ask you is about competition. I don't believe you have a direct competitor, but in terms of the indirect competitor from the external view, how do you manage competition or the comp set?
I can honestly say I don't think we have competition because no one's doing any sort of online flower delivery at a premium level. A lot of people are sort of in the space of like letterbox flowers and, sort of 25-pound AOV. That's just not my DNA. That's not my nature. It's not something I would send to anyone. So I don't think at the premium level, there is really competition. And no one sort of has the obsession with quality and brand either that FLOWERBX has. So I can pretty confidently say we're the only people doing what we're doing.
Which is great in one sense, but also makes it very difficult in terms of you didn't really know if it was 100% going to work because it hadn't been done before. But I think you probably did know it was going to work. And in terms of your expansion, the rapid expansion that you've done into these new markets, for you, was it a case of it was an obvious choice in terms of the next market you go to? How have you tackled that?
Well, I'm still tackling it, but for me, it was obvious to sort of geographically obvious to tackle Europe first because it's closer and we could leverage the same business model. Then New York to me was a very obvious next step. So it was just New York, and we were able to sort of leverage all the incredible B2B clients we have, like Dior, like Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Pomellato, like Cartier, you name it. They were all our loyal clients across Europe. So they immediately came on board as sort of B2B clients in New York, which then sort of allowed us to launch in New York in a cost-effective way because we already had a business. And then, a lot of our clients are international people. They're people that had lived in London and are now back in New York. They're people with a house in New York and a house in LA. So the news picked up really fast. And like, for example, now we're in year 1 in the US and we're doing sort of year 5 UK numbers. So it's very clear that the brand has landed, that there is this exciting early traction. But we haven't even, we're like a drop in the ocean, what we've done so far. So now that's the goal with the next 3 years is to really have meaningful growth in the US.
Recently, I believe last month, it was announced that you had an £8 million Series A financing led by Capstar Ventures. That is a big deal to any startup, must be game-changing completely across the whole business. What led you to want to go into that Series A?
I really do feel like an urgency to do what we're doing. And of course, we could grow over the next 20 years and have meaningful, profitable growth and grow really slowly. But for me, the speed and urgency is very real. So I just want to move. And I have all of these ideas, and it's so frustrating to me to have ideas and to be limited by resource or limited by time or limited by money. So that was one of the problems solved.
The time is, for me, the most precious resource. And if you've got budget to recruit, to bring in the right talent, to grow quickly, that is super exciting. So now you've got that sorted, you can just do world domination.
Exactly.
When you're looking for investors, do you have any advice of who to go with or who not to go with?
100%. Like, that goes back to gut too. Like, don't take money from people that are not nice and that are not aligned with you. And it can be very tempting, and it can be very tempting when you need money. And I've said no now like 4 times to 4 different term sheets of many, many, many millions of pounds because they weren't right. They just weren't right. The terms weren't right. The people weren't right. It wasn't the right fit. And, I really, most recently in this round, there was a U.S. investor that was going to take the round. And at the last minute, I said no. And it was terrifying because I didn't have another option. I didn't have a plan B, but I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. And it actually would have made me not love my job. And that ultimately, I'm so glad I didn't do it. But, there were moments, like deep, dark moments in the summer where I'm like, what if I don't do this now?
God, yeah, it's really the fight or flight moment of huge decisions. But you're right, you've got to think of the future you, and will the future you thank you for that decision in that moment? Same applies to appointing your chairperson, Sir John Peace, who is former chair of Burberry, Standard Chartered PLC, and Experian. Is there any advice you'd give people when they're looking for a new chair?
Oh my gosh, endless advice. So I was super lucky at the very start of Flowerbox. Mark Seba, who had been the CEO of Net-a-Porter, was our chair and really helped me sort of lay the most amazing foundations to Flowerbox. He sadly passed away. And for the past 3.5 years, I've been looking for the one. And I have kissed so many frogs. There have been so many people who were like, it felt like dating. And you'd sit at the table with like, and you're like, you don't even get me. You don't even get where this is going. You don't understand the vision at all. And then there were people that like were in it for financial gain, but weren't really in it because they wanted to contribute. Then there were people that wanted it to go mass fast and like, slash prices. So finding someone who was completely aligned with the vision, with the brand, that saw the same enormous potential that I see and actually has the skills and experience to help me realize it and help me build out the right structure to make it huge. It's been it's been a full-time job on the side. And I'm so, 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 so lucky to have found Sir John. And, I think it's a really pivotal thing for the business.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it was luck. I think it's a lot of hard work. I mean, recruiting is a full-time job, as you said, aside from your other day jobs. But I'm really delighted that you found the one. It's talking about dating.
Totally the one. Like heart in the eyes, the one.
And what advice would you give new entrepreneurs as to how they can thread sustainability or ethical practice through their new businesses?
This isn't luck. This is really determination. But from the onset of Flowerbox, like sustainability was at the core of what we're doing. We have a zero waste business model, which I think is something we don't celebrate enough. So literally we only cut flowers to order. And traditionally in the floral industry, like 60% of flowers end up going to waste and going to landfill. So we had from the get-go electric vans, which again is like super costly. It's not the most convenient thing. We always took the harder route because it was the right thing to do. We have fully compostable flower food. We compost all of our green waste, which when you're trying to get margins, early on, it's really tough to spend any extra money you don't need to, but we have all of our green waste composted. So it's really been at the core of what we're doing, which I think is great because we're not now a bigger company where we have to go back and try to weave it in. It's always been part of our sort of cultural values.
So do the hard yards at the start so you're set up for the future.
Yeah, and it's expensive and difficult and not the easiest way. I mean, to send flowers without having plastic in our packaging, of course, there's a reason every florist uses plastic in their packaging. There's water, and plastic is a good barrier for water. But we, from the beginning, we've used brown recycled paper, craft paper. So it's always been the sort of harder way out, but the right thing to do.
It reminds me of a colleague I used to work with who on Friday, she's like, you know what, Monday Hannah is really going to thank me if Friday Hannah does this today. And it's that future-proofing when you're tiny at the beginning to set up. And I've been doing the same with the mission and the vision and the values of the culture of the business. We're tiny, but in the future, the work is done at the start. So you can thank the future you.
I love that.
And what is the thing you like the most about being self-employed or having started your own business?
I love that the achievements, I feel like I'm a part of them. And not when you work for a big company, I always feel like you do all these great things and it's never really acknowledged. It's never really clear the role that you played in sort of the company's achievements. I love that, the achievements are mine. I also equally dislike that the failures are mine. So I think the ownership of the fate of the company is something that's hugely gratifying, also hugely terrifying.
In terms of growing the business, a lot of people have said to me, the sooner you realize you needed to recruit a team 6 months ago, the better. Do you have advice on bringing people into your business within your team on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I would say the thing that's the toughest about business is people and just keeping everyone aligned, keeping everyone motivated. Also, there are people that are right for the A to B of the business that you really quickly outgrow, that are never going to help the business get from B to C. So I think acknowledging that and not looking at it as a failure. I also think invest in people. Like if you have the resource, spend all the money you can on key people because they end up making it back in droves because they're experts. And at the beginning, obviously, you hire the best people you can. I would have hired anyone that would come to Acton and work with me. That first year or 2 years. But I would say invest in people.
And is there any last golden nugget piece of advice you'd like to offer a new founder?
Oh, like brace yourself. It is the ride of a life, but ride of a lifetime. But it's definitely not for the faint-hearted.
Thank you, Whitney, so much for all of your amazing advice. It's been fascinating talking to you. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, I was thrilled to chat to you. I could chat to you for hours.
If you'd like to contact Whitney, you'll find all of her details in the show notes, along with a recap of the advice she has so kindly shared. Thank you for listening to How to Start Up. I hope these conversations offer you some confidence, encouragement, and reassurance that you're on the right track. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I'd be so appreciative if you were to rate, review, and subscribe, as it will really help other people starting a company discover it. I'm delighted to be joined today by Whitney Bromberg Hawkings, co-founder and CEO of FLOWERBX and one of the UK's most innovative entrepreneurs. Following a career of almost 20 years working for designer Tom Ford, Whitney then identified a market gap within the luxury sector that she set out to fill. She established FLOWERBX in London in 2015, and today Whitney's company is the leading luxury flower service, having had clients such as Dior, Louis Vuitton, and is currently expanding across the US. Having just announced an 8 million Series A round of investment, Whitney shares advice on how to scale at pace and also why you should wait to find the right people to support your business.